talked about the four wars that exist within the war in Iraq. We've talked about the current U.S. strategy. What are the options?
Well, from the way things have emerged, even though U.S. commanders say the situation is dire, it's not hopeless, it's very hard to see any kind of alternative that is anything but ugly and difficult.
The new strategy, flooding troops into Baghdad, several thousand troops into Al-Anbar province, they say that's basically the final shot that the U.S. has, according to many Republicans and Democrats.
It may very well be, and if that's the case, then things are only about to become worse. There's very few positive outcomes that one can see emerging from Iraq at this point. Iran and its allies and its proxies are so strong and so entrenched. Many people say that once that genie was out of the bottle, it can't be put back. Al-Qaeda has been developing such a stronghold within Iraq that it never had under Saddam. The people say that can never be rooted out, certainly not entirely. So what we've seen as a direct result of the invasion and the war is that two of America's greatest enemies have become emboldened and indeed more powerful, stronger than they were before the war. And under any scenario, military or political, it's almost impossible to see how that can be rolled back.
Some Democrats are calling for a cap on U.S. troops, also some Republicans, or some sort of phased withdrawal. What would happen if the U.S. did begin to withdraw? Is the Iraqi government capable of ruling, of providing security for its people in Baghdad, in the rest of the country?
Not at all. It's widely acknowledged by the U.S. military and the administration and analysts and anyone in Iraq that if America were to pull out, then there would be a nightmare almost beyond imagination that would unfold in Iraq.
There are those, though, who support some sort of phased withdrawal or redeployment, saying this will force the Iraqi government to stand up to get their act together faster.
It's impossible. It's impossible. You know, the American administration in Iraq has done everything it can to force the Iraqi government to stand up. But at the end of the day, what is the Iraqi government? The Iraqi government is, by and large, just an alliance or a conglomeration of militia forces. The currency of political power in Iraq to this very day, under this new democracy, is still found at the end of a barrel of the gun. You have no political stake unless you have a militia. So that's why we have this Prime Minister, Nouri al-Maliki, a man who himself does not have a militia in such a dire political situation.
So if you're saying some sort of withdrawal or phased redeployment would lead to bloodshed, you say the current strategy, there's nothing really all that new about it. Do you have an answer?
Well, there's a few things that people suggest, none of which are terribly attractive to the people of Iraq, nor to the people of the West. I mean, it just doesn't seem that there's any road forward that does not involve the spilling of so much innocent blood or the abandonment of so many of the principles that we of the West hold dear.
Some talk about a kind of partition, either a very, actual partition or some sort of soft partition.
Partition of any kind, again, impacts directly on the interests of all these regional players, and most argue that should you partition, that again will force these regional players to increase their negative activities in Iraq. For example, we would see the Arab states feeling themselves forced to actively support Sunni insurgencies and indeed Al-Qaeda. So partitioning in many ways is not seen as a solution.
The new head of the Defense Department has suggested that by March the U.S. should have some indication whether the al-Maliki government is actually living up to its promises. Lieutenant General Petraeus seems to be talking about a longer timeline to find out whether this, what they're calling a new strategy, is actually going to work. Do you have a sense of how much time it might take to see whether or not this will work?
Do we need more time to know if this strategy will work? In my view, no. Not at all. It's clear and abundant now that the strategy, as it stands, is not working and will not work. It's strengthening America's enemies. The American military presence in Iraq now, what will become 160,000 troops, is still in many ways not enough to really secure the country, to make people feel safe, to defeat Al-Qaeda, and to rebuff Iranian interests. So that has not changed.
So militarily, if there's not a solution, is there possibly a political solution if all the actors involved, or the major actors involved, had a change of heart, had a change of mind, or suddenly became willing to make some sort of accommodation?
It's in no one's interests to change their minds. I mean, many of the players that the US is either relying upon or being forced to confront or deal with in the Iraqi government, their interests are not aligned with American interests. So no, there's no incentive for them to change. Why should they?
So the wars within the war continue?
The wars within the war continue.
Michael Ware, thanks.
Thank you.